Oh, this is not.
That's it.
It's off, right?
No, it's on and it's recording audio. So just careful.
Well, because they're making me very, yeah.
All right, thank you guys for that. Hopefully you got up and you got to move and you're feeling good. This is our agenda for today. We're going to start with performance data, strengths, needs, baseline, and adverse effect statement. So this is really talking about the present levels, that first part of the IEP. That's all we're doing today is the present levels. So here is the learning target. I can develop present levels that describe a student in enough detail that data decisions can be made about programming needs and to support the student. So this is kind of the IEP process. So it's a flow chart. And one of the things that we like to show is that it's ongoing. So we go through these processes, but IEPs are a working document. They can change if they need to. So we always want to be thinking of this as a program and look at the student holistically. So start with the present levels. If you have your IEP guidance document, did everybody get one of these? All right. What you're going to do, you should have also, you can pick up a highlighter if you don't have one. Go ahead and read page 10 to the little chart and highlight anything that stands out, any questions you might have, anything that you want to remember for later. as everybody's kind of wrapping up, what are some things that stood out when you read this section of the guidance document?
Data that it requires actual numbers
Okay,
and not just feelings or observations, but actual percentages of the time.
right, so we need actual data, we're not just going on our feelings, we're gonna use the data that we've collected to make decisions. What other kinds of things have stood out to you?
That even though your wonderful school psychologists are writing your summaries so that they can be copied and pasted into clips, it's not sufficient for your clip.
So,
It's a good starting.
it's a starting point. It is a piece of information that we're going to use when we're considering the PLEP, but it is a present level, so depending on the age of that evaluation, it might not be present. It might be 3 or 4 years old. So while it is a good resource to use, that's not the only thing we're going to use when we're writing the present level. So you're correct on that. Anything else that stood out? Okay, so why is the present level a foundation and support for the IEP? Why do we consider this the present level the foundation?
Because every other piece of the IP has to be grounded.
Yes. So if you didn't hear, she said every other piece of the IEP has to be grounded in the present levels. Good job. All right.
And they're the basis for all of the other programming. So they're the basis, the information in the present levels, all the data and all the information there is the basis for your goals, any supports that we put in, supplementary aids and services, accommodations. There should be some rationale and data in the present level to support those decisions in the RP.
So the first thing one of the things that we're going to do when we're writing our IEP is we're going to look at the eligibility because that's going to determine what parts of the present levels we're going to address. So if you have a student who is deaf or hard of hearing, they should be eligible under a hearing impairment, and we're going to make sure that we cover that in the health, vision, hearing section of the present levels. So regardless of whether they have services for a hearing impairment, which obviously if they're here they do, we're still going to address that in the present level. Sometimes we have information that can go into that section, but the student doesn't qualify under a health condition, so we're putting information in there, but certain disabilities, we have to address certain parts of the present levels.
So for a hearing impairment, a student qualified as having a hearing impairment, so therefore they had needs. And part of qualifying is that they need specially designed instruction and that there is an adverse effect because of that hearing loss.
So here are the steps for completing the present levels area. I'll give you guys a chance to kind of look at it. I think it's on page 12. It says, yeah, so if you go to page 11, I'll give you a chance to look at that. So I'm not reading you the screen. And feel free to highlight anything you have a question about.
Or page 12.
Oh, yeah, it's page 12, I'm sorry.
Yes, we're actually gonna read that in a minute, so we'll get there. Raise your fingers, 1 to 2 to 3 minutes, or 0 minutes if you need more time to read. Oh. Thank you. Okay, all right. So we'll just walk through the basic steps for present levels. The first thing that we do, you notice number 1 says we look at grade level standards, right? Because our purpose, the reason why we're supporting our students is to get them to have access to the grade level standards, right? Oh, sorry. Okay. So to get their access to the grade level standards. Now, sometimes our students are not at grade level. We know that, right? So start looking at those sub-skills that will help them eventually get to the grade level standard. But we have to understand where we want our students to go, and that is, to those grade level standards. The second part is we're going to determine the student's current educational performance in both academic and functional performance. We'll talk about functional performance, but I'll just give you a hint. It's more like your social emotional goals or employment skills. And then for the third part, you're going to check if the student is commensurate with peers or not an area of concern at this time. So if a particular area, let's say it's academics, it's not an area of concern, you click that box, you go on. You're going to find another area, because they have an IEP, that they will have some concerns. And at that point, in your present levels, we should have a description of that student's relative strengths. We'll talk about what that should look like, best practice, their needs and concerns, and Katie brought up the eligibility piece. It's important to understand the eligibility piece because that dictates what pieces or what areas we should be addressing. And then baseline performance for each goal. So if you have 3 goals, you're going to have how many baseline? 3 baseline statements. And we're going to describe, if we put data in there, make sure it's describing how the student is performing compared to their peers. Because we're sharing this with parents, and parents, they're not going to understand a standardized score that we drop in there. And even an elementary teacher to middle school may not understand what a good district assessment is, district-wide assessment like math or universal springer. So make sure we're putting in there, what grade level is that? And then describe how the student's performance affects the student's progress and access to that general privilege. And that's that adverse effect statement.
So there are 5 essential components of the present level. We start with strengths, needs, baseline data, the performance data, which are other pieces of data that we're going to bring in based on other classroom assignments, just anything that's going to help support the student, and then the adverse effect. So those are the pieces that we want to cover. And Christina, I'm not sure if she made this acronym. You did?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so she has created the acronym SNABE to help you remember it, and she has a little SNABE superhero.
So, we've done this with a lot of beginning teachers, and every area that there is a concern, they would write SNABE at the top, and so they would write their present level and then go back and say, oh, do I have the strength? And then they take it off. Do I have the needs? Yes. The adverse effect. All of those pieces, because when KDE or somebody comes in to monitor your all's IEPs and your documentation, these are the essential components that must be in the IEP. If they're not in the present levels, they're considered non-compliant.
So,
As we start drafting the IEP, oh, here. start drafting the IEP, I'm sorry, I brought Katie along, and she is great at IEPs, but this is my slide, so she's probably like, I know what she probably said. So gather, the first thing that you guys want to do is to gather and analyze the data. Oh, I'm so sorry. There needs to be I need a line. Help me. So sorry. To analyze that data. So it's not just the data that you collect. It could be data that another teacher has collected. It could be that you're doing a teacher interview. How's my student doing? What is my student's strengths and needs? It could be, if it's social emotional goals, it could be the lunchroom, it could be on the bus. We're having discussions because we are that student's best advocate along with the parents, and we need to make sure that we are covering everything that the student has needed. So it makes our IEP so much richer when we have conversations with others. And another thing, you don't want to go into a meeting and your speech language pathologist has some data that doesn't jive with, just make sure that we are all on the same page. It might not jive, but just make sure that we're having those discussions so that we can support that student. And as you look at the data, you're going to analyze for strengths and weaknesses or needs. And that's how we get the strength statements and the need statement. It's based on the data that we're collecting.
So one of the things that she mentioned is just working with your general education teacher. I know being a special school, you may not have as much access. What do you all do to collaborate with a general education teacher?
So, Katie, many of them are
Okay.
general ed teachers
Okay.
too, so,
So you have the
so
content
they have
specialist
some
in your
content
group. Okay.
specialists here.
All right.
So, and then, most of them, all LEAs are expected to bring a general ed teacher or someone knowledgeable of the content in that area to each ARC. Now, they don't always do that, but they are expected to do that.
That's all right. So now we're going to talk about their current performance data and just what that looks like and where we're getting it from. The first thing we're going to do is review the evaluation data. We can use, as Christina said, we can use our screeners, we can use RTI data if you have that, classroom data, monitoring, your progress monitoring, anything that you have collected in the classroom. And you're going to identify strengths and needs among those pieces of data that you've collected. The next thing that you need to do is prioritize the need. So sometimes we have students that have a lot of needs, and we can't put a goal in the IEP for every single area that student has a deficit. So we want to prioritize the needs. So we're going to look at, as Christina said, we're going to look at those standards, and we're going to see where that student is going and where they are, and really look at where the need is for them. I really like to look at the prerequisite skills to see, because a lot of times they go across different standards. So you can find what those prerequisite skills are and then work on the ones that are going to make the biggest impact for the students. And then you're going to establish baseline data. Is this a clickable link? Or is it just... Okay, so then you're going to establish baseline data. You might already have that from their from their progress monitoring. You might be collecting new baseline data, so if you need, if you're writing a new goal and you don't have baseline data for it, you're going to collect that and use that to determine where they're at. The biggest thing there is that we want to make sure that the data that we've collected actually measures the goal that we're writing. So you want to make sure that if it's off a little bit, so an example that we use, if you have a student and they're going to be working on a 5th grade passage for reading, and all of our data is for a 4th grade passage, then we want to make sure that we collect data on that 5th grade passage so that we know where they're going, because the data isn't going to match when we go at the end of the year to see if they've made progress on that goal.
Can I ask a question? Do you all have any questions about what she's talking about when she talks about prioritizing need? Because I know we have several students that have multiple disabilities, and so I know sometimes it's hard for us to prioritize their need or choose how many goals we want to write. And so I think we need to, that needs to be something that we focus on here and really listen to what she's saying about, because we can't have, 10 or 15 goals for a kid. That's virtually impossible for us to monitor. So I think, I just really pay really close attention to what she's saying there about prioritizing that need.
Right, and just because it's not in the IEP does not mean that we're not teaching it. So there are some things that are gonna be in the IEP, and those are gonna make the biggest impact, hopefully, for that student. But we're still teaching them a lot of other things. So that's, what Jane said, we don't wanna have 10 goals because we're collecting data on 10 goals. And we're probably already doing a lot of that in the classroom, and we're collecting classroom data for that. So it's kind of like, don't make it so hard on yourself by having so much to manage. All right, so you're gonna go to pages 8 and 9 in your guidance documents, and I'll give you a few minutes to read that. Annotate and highlight anything that kind of stands out, but also think what skills are considered functional performance skills. And if you can, write, fill in the blank. Present levels cannot be blank from year to year. So you'll hopefully find that answer in pages 8 and 9.
So that's getting to that question that you were asking about functional skills. So you'll find it in these pages.
So if you would like to jot down your notes, there is, on your guided notes, page 2, there's a place for you to jot down notes.
Yes.
Maybe we could open the doors and. Yeah.
It looks like everybody is kind of finishing up there. So what are functional skills? Our friend over here asked that question earlier, but from what you read, what are functional skills?
Non-academic areas.
I'm sorry, what?
Non-academic areas.
Non-academic areas? Okay.
What else?
Yeah, what else?
Mobility, social, emotional needs, behavioral expectations.
Right, adaptive skills, executive functioning, which is a big word, but that's another one. What else do
Paul
you?
Harvey, the rest of the story.
I'm sorry, what?
I said to quote Paul Harvey, it's
The rest of the story. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And And then the question here, present levels cannot be blanked from year to year. Copied, yeah. So one of the things that we have to think about when we're doing our IEP is we're looking at, what is today, the 27th? Is that right? So we're looking at January 27th of 2023 until January 26th of 2024. So we're prioritizing the needs based on the IEP cycle, not the school year cycle. Just to kind of make sure that everybody understands that side of it, that it's an IEP cycle, which I'm sure all of you already know that, but just want to make sure. So she has in here also some other employability skills, daily living activities, behavior, mental health. So there are a lot of things that go into writing the IEP or into that student's education and program aside from just the academics.
Ma'am, I have a quick question. The part where you said present levels can't be copied from year to year, I understand that. Look, a lot of times, because it's IEP calendar years, we'll get a kid, like, I think the majority of my caseload next year, they're all in August.
Okay.
So I might know them for maybe 2 weeks, you know, and you don't want to copy exactly, you could copy what you've seen in the classroom and done, but is it all right to put like teacher observations from last year, like to discuss with the people that you were, like your peers, so just so you have an idea, because
Yeah.
like I'm thinking of the ones that you might have 2 weeks with them and then you're having
Right,
IEP, you know
right,
what I
right,
mean?
right.
Like you don't know them that well.
Yeah, so you're definitely, I mean, that's another, the previous IEP is definitely gonna be another piece of the puzzle. Hopefully you have some progress monitoring from the other IEP that you can look at. But, the one thing that I always like to think about is an IEP is a living document. So you might write an IEP based on the information that you have right now, but you know that you're gonna need to update it later after you've had some time with the student, and that's okay. It's not always the ARC chair's favorite thing, but it is what is best for the students.
Do you guys, in Infinite Campus, do you guys put your progress reports in Infinite Campus? Okay, so that would be a good starting point to look at the previous progress reports. And that might give you some information. But let's say you had the kid for 2 weeks and you know they have this goals, right, these goals. You can go ahead and start giving them probes, start assessing them on those goals. So at least you have something to go by and those progress reports. And if need be, and if you feel like you need to do this, you can contact the previous teachers and the previous schools. So.
Thank you.
All right, so the next thing we're gonna do, you should have picked up a copy of Jimmy's IEP. It says IEP for training purposes in blue at the top of it. And what we want you to do is to look through the present levels in the IEP and highlight performance data that you can find. And there's some examples up here of what performance data could look like. So we have expanded core curriculum. If they're EL, there might be information about that. Their functional hearing and listening and communication, assistive technology. So look through his IEP and do a kind of a deep dive and highlight the performance data that you find. In yellow, yeah, I'm sorry. In yellow. Highlight it in yellow.
You were sharing them. Are there any extras? Just share. There's no.
Oh, yeah, we brought enough IEPs that people could share because we wanted you to have conversations. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. So if you don't have one, see if you can find a partner that does. And if not, we might have a couple more. At least one. case you're looking through it, this is a training document, so there could be some intentional mistakes in the document. So just don't let it trip you up. Yeah, if you all need to come up to the screen to read it, please feel free to move around the room. I know it's small, so if you need to come up, feel free.
These examples are also on page 8 and 9 of your IEP guidance document of performance standards.
Okay, so kind of finish up where you're at now. Would anybody like to talk about something that you found performance data wise in Jimmy's IEP?
Did you find data?
Did you find it?
What's some examples of data?
Map scores. So map scores. So since you answered, could you pick someone else in the room to do the next? Sorry. Okay, all right. K-prep scores, okay.
Todd said I'll go next.
Okay.
Somebody stole mine.
Well, would you like to pick someone else to go?
Let me see. I'll pick you.
Running records, okay. So who's the next participant?
Oh, Sarian.
Oh, doggone you. You said running records. I
I did.
personally just like the in-classroom, data with the sight words, 57%, previous and suffixes, 56%, 110 words per minute at grade 4 level. But then somewhere we read that it reduces by 10% when you went up without something. Thank you. Yeah. Did you notice that as they talk about performance data, they name where they're getting their data? This is K-Prep data, this is classroom data, this is running records. So best practice is to name where you're getting your data as well.
So now what we would like you to do, did everybody bring an IEP that you're currently working on, or do you have your computer available? So you're going to look at your IEP and do the same activity. Go through and highlight things that you would consider performance data within your IEP. If you don't have one, find someone in the room who does and buddy up. While you're looking at your data, the next thing that you're going to do, it's in your guided notes on page 2, and it says reflections. Think about your own IEP writing skills. What are some areas of strength that you found while you were going through your IEP for you as the IEP author, and then areas for growth that you found for yourself?
As it relates to performance data. So how did you do writing your performance data in your own present levels?
interest of time, we're gonna keep moving forward so that we can get to all of the parts of the IEP. So the next part are our strengths and needs. So, we're gonna talk about relative strength, and we already kind of mentioned that a little while ago. Relative strength is something, well, we talked about it in prioritizing goals, but a relative strength is something that even if that student has a disability, this is an area that they have a strength that they're doing better in. So we do need to prioritize those. The thing that I'm sure nobody here does, but we have seen in IEPs before are things like Christina is a nice girl who gets along with all of her friends. And while that is a strength for Christina, that's not what we're really talking about. What we would like to know is what are her strengths as they pertain to reading or math or writing. It could be that we have social emotional status, but we still want to go into a little bit more depth when we're talking about the student's strengths. So here is a question for you all. What would your closest friend say is your best trait as a teacher?
What's your strength?
What is your strength as a teacher? That's not a really hard question. Feel free to ask your best friend who is in the room. So what are some of your all's strengths that you think your best friend would say about you?
Patience.
Patience. That's a good one to have.
And that's related to teaching, right?
Yes.
It's a skill related to teaching. We have to have that.
That's right. What's that? She believes in her kids. That's a strength.
High expectations is needed for teachers. That is a skill for a teacher.
That's right. Anybody? Oh, thanks. Okay. Warmth and openness. And that's important because we need to develop friendships, our relationships with our students and make sure that they feel like they're in a place where they're safe to learn. So warmth and openness is definitely a strength in teaching. Anybody else want to name one off?
Being flexible.
Flexibility, yeah, that's another good one, for sure. All right, so here are some strength statements about math. And we just kind of want you to pick the one that is written correctly. So the first one is Johnny is able to complete basic math calculations within 5. Ahmed is a sweet young man. And Ariel's relative strength is completing math assignments on time. So which one would we say is a strength as it's relative to one? Yeah, the first one for sure. That's an easy question. All right, so we're gonna dive back into Jimmy's IEP, and we're gonna specifically look for the strength statements, and you're gonna highlight those in pink. So if you wanna go ahead and start looking at his IEP for a couple of minutes, and then we're gonna follow that same pattern, so then you're gonna look at your students' strengths.
Some of them may be good, some of them may not be good. So.
She's cooking, babe. What's your strength? Creating really smart babies.
Did you find at least one strength statement? Did you guys find one? Did it follow the best practice? Is it focused on a skill in that particular area?
So this, we're talking about Jimmy's IEP right now, so do you want to name one or one that you didn't feel like was written quite right?
maybe not written quite right under social emotional. It says he has strengths and adaptive skills, home living skills and social skills, but it doesn't say how they know he has those strengths.
Okay. So
Like
she
what
said
they
that
specifically used
it
or
says
did.
that he has strength in these areas, but it doesn't say, how they know that information. What else? Anybody else have one that stood out?
Yeah, under math, Jimmy's baseline data for accurately solving math problems is 0%.
Okay,
What kind of math?
right. That's true. That one might be baseline data,
Yeah.
but yes, yeah, you're right. What kind of math problems? Any other strength statements?
Well, we were not thrilled with, relative reading comprehension strength is answering literal questions. We felt that was really kind of vague,
Okay.
and maybe if it could go a little bit deeper and explain what they meant by literal.
By literal. Okay. All right. So then I gave you that preview. Go ahead and look at the one IEP that you brought from your caseload and look at your strength statement and think about, highlight them and then think about where your strengths and needs are as it relates to this. So now what you're going to do is you're going to write your own strength statement based on the things that you've identified as your, that you identified earlier as a strength, right? So write a strength statement about your, I guess the data, the performance data. So you can write a strength statement for yourself, basically. And that is on the bottom of page 2 as well. Yeah. Okay, so next we're going to talk about prioritized need, and very similarly to relative strength, prioritized need are those things that we know the student needs as foundational skills in order to move forward with their IEP goal. So the first thing that we need to know is that the student's needs are going to be based on their eligibility. So both academic and functional skills should be based on their eligibility. Other educational needs that result from their disability. So if you have a student who has a disability that may not necessarily fall under academics, so if we took autism, for example, we don't necessarily have to fill out academics if the student has autism. We do need to fill out communication, and we need to fill out social emotional. But autism can, students can have academic needs because of their autism. So we are still going to be able to write our IEP, write goals on the IEP and present levels about their academic skills. But we want to make sure that we definitely cover communication and social and emotional. So there's kind of two two things there. One, you have to make sure you're covering where that student is eligible, and then the other, you need to make sure that you're meeting all the other needs that the student has on in their programming. So you're going to bring supporting data to the ARG meeting if other educational needs are evident. So if you are going to write an academic goal for a student with autism, you're going to bring the data to support that that student's disability is impacting them in that area. So we're going to dive back into Jimmy's IEP. See if you can find the needs statements on his IEP and highlight those in orange. All right, so did you all find any need statements for Jimmy in his IEP? What are some of Jimmy's needs? Either way.
Okay. In math, it says his prioritized need is multiplication and division, but it doesn't really explain how he's struggling in that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so his need is multiplication and division, but it doesn't really go into why that's needed. All right.
In reading, it says to develop a word reading accuracy level with a focus on improving the decoding strengths.
Okay. All right. So we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing. Look at your caseload IEP and identify or highlight some of the needs that you have written into the IEP or the previous IEP. And on the back of your sheet, if you want to write down, we have a place for you to take notes. All right, if you had to change anything in the IEP that you're looking at, what kind of change would you make
In the one that you brought.
in the one that you brought?
Or Jimmy's.
Or Jimmy's?
I would have to add need statements,
Okay,
like across the board.
Okay.
I'll throw myself under the bus too. I put like what he can't do, like put his positives and then what he struggles with. But I need to add in like, so I put, like, cannot read these words in print or whatever, but would need to add in, he needs to read the words in print with, and then some kind of reason how he would do it.
Thank you all for being vulnerable like that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
that is fine.
Todd said, I recognize that I need to put down areas of growth and improvement in mine. Those are some things I need to focus on.
our students are always learning and evolving, so are we as teachers. And I think as you get more practice, it becomes easier to do. And the better you know your students, the easier it becomes. Sometimes the hardest part is just knowing what to put there, so.
So do we need to say the priority, the greatest priority, like?
Right, the
Prioritize
prioritize
need.
need.
Yeah.
You don't have to use prioritize need, you don't have to use those words, but you have to describe the need. Is that what you're asking? You have to-
I kind of feel like I've got the general
Yes.
there, but probably not as specific as it needs to be.
One of the things I always try to think about is just, you don't have to write that, but if that would make it easier for someone to find if they were doing a record review, then you might as well put it in there, but it's not a requirement. So I kind of would do that just so that I was like, okay, I know it's there. It says, it, yeah.
Well, and I'm the same, because I feel like I don't specifically say he needs, but if you back up in the, his current performance, the way I have it written, I'm telling you what he had to have in order to do that.
Right.
So he needed that in order to do it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't specifically say
Is
needs, yeah.
I think as long as you're including that in there as part of your narrative and it's clear that that's what you're saying, I don't think you have to have a certain terminology to say this is a need. All right.
I have a quick question. I'm sorry, it's kind of back on performance data, and I don't know, maybe Janice might know as well. Because we are a deaf school and there aren't exactly so many assessments or things that are geared for our students, a lot of the performance data we get is stuff that we use in class, like teacher-made assessment, or
Yeah.
maybe you found a website that, and so I have that, like on this website, they can do this, in this category, this. But then other things I'll describe like what we do in class. Like, for example, I'm talking about the fraction he knows. So I said in sign, he understands what a numerator is and what a denominator is. But there, should I be, where as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, the next teacher would read it more as a narrative. But would I need to add in more like on this teacher-made assessment type? You know what I'm saying? Because they're reading it and they're knowing in a narrative form, but not exactly saying on this test and that test. Does that make sense?
So as you're
I
talking,
know.
I'm thinking of it as if a stranger, they went back to Boyle County or Danville Independent, would someone who is serving this child and implementing the IEP know what to do next?
Okay.
Would they be able to pick up and implement the IEP so that they knew, like if it's numerator and denominator as well, or it's, single digits, or, they don't grasp fractions, so we know that that's gonna be very difficult later for algebra. Like that's like an essential skill kids need is fractions.
Yeah.
So that building block, so having that specificity
Okay.
will help you think about, if a stranger picked this up, could they implement the IEP?
So the more specific okay, thank you, that
And
helps.
if you're saying things
Yeah.
like teacher-made assessments
Yes.
or running records
Mhm.
and those kinds of things, I mean, and to Tricia's point, you have to define it,
Yeah,
what it is, so.
thank you.
And I kind of understand where you're coming from the low instance perspective
Yeah.
too. We don't have a lot of, we have almost no standardized testing for our students, so almost everything that we're bringing in is going to be classroom assessments and teacher made, so.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
All right, so now we're gonna take a 5-minute break, and then we will come back, and Christina's gonna start with basics.
Or you. My question.
All right, I would get up and move and go.
Let's go stand by the window. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Everything, all of his items, always. See, there's no academic because he's on level, but all of his sections say that help you. However, for communication, you can do that throughout your whole IP. That's helped me as a parent of going specific just look down it breaks us apart. And it's like that
Yeah. Cool.
I know that's helped me as a mom, so I try to like remind more like structure. The Alfred one has a bomb system, so. Because I also bring.
I'm going by this. Thank you. But it's not gonna put the word print. But I didn't put that dress, but I put it, like Sarah said, yes, I love it. Let's go by that window. Great. Your cheeks are red.
Oh, no, I didn't. You're, but I appreciate it.
This was the third act. The first act was cognitive.
So it was like, Anderson, Shelby, that, because it didn't cut well and it swirled around to where I think it was like nothing. It was nothing. Okay. No. Yeah. So it's just, and my cars mine said 29 when I was coming out, it said 29. But like the roads were clear, there was nothing, we didn't even have any plates, nothing on my back deck this morning, nothing.
When I did turn around, I really considered saying. It's like there's nothing like, yeah, she's a mess.
Oh, yeah, she just told us she was asked to. So on Google Slides, yeah. She said, well, and it keeps saying IEP, like instead of IEP. Yeah, you just,
You're in it.
so if you're on a Google Slide, you have to be chosen.
I think we should, because there were so many questions, I think we need to remember.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, and it's not. I'm gonna tell you something. Right. Yeah, yeah. Talk about it. All right. We're gonna come back together and keep going forward. As people are walking in, I'm gonna show you, I've had a few people ask, and they said just to show everybody how to do this, but the closed captioning that's built into Google, does anybody else know how to use that already? All right, so, person asked. All right, so all you have to do is at the bottom here, there's these three little dots. There's three little dots. When you click on that, it'll give you an option, and here it says caption preferences. You can choose text position, so I moved it to the top because I realized if you're sitting out there, it would be easier to see at the top. And then the text size, which I always put it on extra large, this is extra large. And then you just click on the captions, and it'll do it. They're not perfect. They're not perfect, but they do better than, nothing.
I was just gonna, if you would look in your book, just at the questions on slides. Start. I'll just use page 15 just as an example. But every single part of the present level that they've gone through has guiding questions. I've been teaching special education 31 years, and I still, when I go to teach or coach in a PLC, I have mine all tabbed, and I use this every time. When we're talking about it, we're referencing it, and we're pulling it out of one page. Sometimes to provide feedback, etc. So I just want to make sure that this is something that anybody like in higher ed, when they were doing, they had to have this with them at all times. Because that is what it helps support. And you can also help, like there's some of you that are coaching and mentoring others too. This would be a great opportunity to work through it. I just wanted to there's been a lot of record reviews or complaints that we've been working with in corrective action in other districts. And some of them are, what we're seeing is they scored 78%, which is higher than the 63% that they did last year. But that doesn't tell us in what capacity that percent. What does that number mean? What skills did they improve upon? So it's really not about the score. In any case, it's all about the skills. And I think actually you all are very an expert in skills, so to speak. So I think you articulating the skills of an individual student is really going to be to your advantage when you're writing that present level. So know that that is what is really painting that picture, connecting those dots, really thinking about that child and the whole self. Second piece I wanted to say is when we talked about eligibility, what I just wanted to clarify. So autism in the eligibility form, those two areas helps. You have to check that this is an area of concern to be eligible for autism, the social communication. What she means is that's something that minimum you need to make sure that you address. And so we were providing last year corrective action to a whole district, and they had to do every record review on every child that had autism. And what they were seeing is if they were not receiving speech language pathologists, they were saying their communication was commensurate with peers.
Whoa.
Which is exactly that same response. And we know that your expectation as a teacher thinking about that. Now, what needed to happen is speech language pathologists needed to coach and mentor those teachers to know how they can address communication in the classrooms. And that collaboration can kind of work. So these are some points that we have had to go in and do corrective action plan that we think this being proactive and preventive today will help support those conversations here to avoid that.
Okay, and one other thing, just from a question during the break, when we're talking about strengths and needs, we are talking about those strengths and needs as they are compared to their same age peers. So not other disabled peers, but their actual same age. I just want to make sure that I reiterated that because I didn't say it when we went over it the first time. Now, Christina.
We're gonna talk about your favorite part, which is baseline data. This is different than performance data, because performance data, if you look at that funnel, was that top area. And performance data can cover all sorts of skills in one assessment, right? Think about your MAP or your district-wide assessments. Think about, think about your integrated assessment reports. There's a lot of skills in there. Baseline is different. Let's talk about that. So every goal requires a baseline and a present level. So you guys said it, 3 goals, 3 baseline statements. Let's talk about how tight those baseline statements should be. First, we need 3 to 4 data points. And that's how we determine baseline. Just keep that in the back of your mind, 3 to 4 data points. And what we ask ourselves when we're looking or thinking about baseline is, what data source am I going to use? Can I use progress monitoring data? In some instances, we can. Or do I need to use probes, new probes? And the next question is, how do I determine that one point from those 3, that central tendency? Am I going to use the mean or the median method to determine that? And there is a difference, and there's a rationale for each of those. So progress monitoring data, if you have a goal that's going to continue the same skill, for example, a student was met the goal for being on task at 50%, and now they're using the same goal on task at 65, 70%. Then you can use progress monitoring data because you're going to measure it the same way. You've got the data on that particular skill. So you would look at your graph or your last 4 data points in your progress monitoring data or graph, and you will find the central tendency for that, or baseline for that. So, when do we use probes? When you don't have the data, and that really is the end of the story. So things like, this skill could change. Have you guys ever seen a student that has been working on task and may have mastered that, and now they're moving to a different skill like self-advocacy? Have you guys ever seen something like that? So self-advocacy is totally different than on task, so you can't use that progress monitoring. Possibly the circumstance. For example, Katie brought that up. If you are using 4th grade reading probes in your progress monitoring, but your new goal is going to be on the 5th grade, right? The data from the 4th grade probes are not going to give us information about how the student performed in the 5th grade. So we have to get those probes. Great thing about probes is you can do them fairly quickly. It's not like progress monitoring, it's going to be 4 weeks. Probes could be done very quickly, especially if you're using curriculum-based measures. And then the method of measurement is also something that has to align. So if you were using a frequency count, and now we're going to latency, what you have, the information on that frequency count, even if it may be the same skill, is not going to tell you how that student is doing on the other one I told you, whichever that was.
Latency.
Thank you, latency. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to practice. You're going to tell me, based on the scenario, are we going to use progress monitoring data or new probes? But before we do that, I want you to try and talk to your partner. Tell your partner when you would use progress monitoring data. So go ahead and turn to a partner and do All right, so we have to have the same, what? Same skill and same measure. Yes, thank you. Okay, now here's the example. And you guys work with a partner to determine which one of these you would use. A student met the goal of remaining on task for 45%, and now they're going to increase that goal to 65% on task. It's the same. Okay, so which one would it be? Progress monitoring or new pros?
Same progress.
Progress monitoring. Perfect. Yes. Okay. Congratulations. You guys have a new student. She's walked into your classroom. You didn't know about them, of course. And then you have an ARC meeting the next week. Yay! Yes. What are you going to use? Are you going to use progress monitoring or pros? Pros. Okay, so progress monitoring indicated a student met the decoding goal of consonant, vowel, consonant words, and the ARC determined that the new goal would focus on decoding multisyllabic words. Which would we use? Pros. Dang, you all I cannot trip you up. Okay, progress monitoring indicated a student met the written expression goal for simple sentences, and the new goal is going to keep that same skill, but now they're going to use a writing probe, or writing rubric.
Oh, wait, okay.
Let me go back to measure.
Yes, and I heard you actually, I heard you over there, I heard you say apples to apples. That's a good way to remember when we're going to use progress monitoring, apples to apples. Same skill, same method of measuring. That was tricky, I do admit. Okay. Now we're going to talk about which method do we use. Now we know, okay, I'm going to use this data source. Now, which method do we need to use? The first thing we need to know when we're talking about which method is what an outlier is. So our math people probably know what an outlier is. It's a number that's much higher or lower than the rest of the data points. So we are going to use the median, and I'll tell you how to do it in a minute, if you have an outlier, because the outlier is going to skew your data towards that big or small number. And what the median does is you're putting the data 50% before it and 50% after it, and that's the split. The mean, we all know what that is, we get the average. And actually, I will admit that as a teacher, I always did the mean. I didn't really know the difference, right? So we'll talk about what the difference is. First thing, when you're looking at your 4 data points or 3 data points, you have to ask yourself, is there an outlier? If there is an outlier, we're going to use the median. Good job. All right. So the median, in order to do this, you rank order your numbers, and then you look for that central number. So if you have 3 data points, it's going to be the center one. If you have 4 data points, you take the middle 2 numbers and average them. And then the mean, we all know. Do I need to go over mean? We all know that. Yes. Okay. Now here, I'm going to show you why it makes a difference. So consider this data set up here. 40%, 30%, 90%, and 40%. There is an outlier, right? 90%. If we did it the median way, we looked at the 2 central numbers, we averaged it, we're going to get a baseline of 40%. If we did it the typical way that most people do it is the mean way, we add up all those numbers and we divide by the total data points, we get 50%. Now let me show you why that makes a difference here. The black X's are these data points here. The median method, right here, this is the baseline for the median method. Notice where it is. It's closer to where the most of the numbers are, right? The mean method is skewing towards the 90%, but it's higher. This is telling you that the baseline is higher than the majority of your scores, and that's not accurately reflecting how the student is performing. All right, so now we have to figure out, according to the guidance document, according to Kentucky Department of Ed and our Kentucky administrative regulations that we're bound to, this is how tight our baseline data should be. Well, it's best guidance in your IEP guidance document. Okay, so look at the baseline data over here, because that's what we do first. We gather the baseline data. Baseline data for reading word accuracy at the 5th grade level is 98 correct words per minute per oral reading fluency prose. I don't even have to look here because I know what the school is going to focus on. I know it's going to focus on reading accuracy. I know it's going to be at the 5th grade level, and I know that I'm going to be using an oral reading fluency prose. Voila, there it is. Then you add the extra goal language in there over 3 consecutive weeks and yada yada. So, in your baseline statement, you should have the same skill and the same method of measurement. And if you look in your guidance document, it's written in there on page 66, I believe. Yes, please highlight this statement right here. It's on page 66. Okay. Page 66, and it's this bottom, second to last paragraph. The method used to establish, actually, would somebody read that for us as they underline? Who'd be willing to read that for us? Thank you.
The method used to establish baseline performance should be the same method used to monitor progress. For example, if a running record is used to establish baseline for fluency, then a running record should be used for ongoing progress monitoring.
So right there, it's telling us. And guess what? As a teacher, I don't think I did it that way. Now, as a presenter and learning about it now, I understand that that's how it should be written. And it might have been a couple of years before I had my IEP training, so it started, and then we had so many years in between. And you know how things happen. Yep, we know how that happens. Sometimes we hear from somebody else, this is the way we do it, and really, the guidance document is our guide. Okay, so right here, baseline is the first step in progress monitoring. So that's your first data point on your graph. Do you guys use graphs? Y'all use graphs? Okay. So that should be your first data point on the graph. So these are all using oral reading fluency prose. This data point, your baseline data point, needs to relate to the rest of the data. So if you've used a different probe, you're focused on a different skill, that data point is meaningless. That's why we have to have the same skill and the same method of measurement or your progress measurement. So, in order to look at baseline data, when a reviewer comes to look at your, if you are the lucky winner, the lucky chosen one, and somebody's coming to review yours, they would look at your goals first, and then they're going to go back to your present level, and they're going to look for the corresponding baseline statement. In Jimmy's IEP, please take out a green highlighter. I want you to look at one of the goals and go back to one of the present levels and see if they correspond. Not every one of them are going to correspond because we made an intentional mistake. But I want you to look for those. Choose one goal and one present level. You can work with a partner if you want to. find at least one baseline statement? Did you find at least one baseline statement? Yes? We're still working over here? You guys good? Okay. Did it correspond to the present level? No, which one did you read?
We did the reading.
The reading goal. Okay. Did it have the same skill?
The same skill but different methods. So one is an oral reading probe and the other one is weekly assessments. And then the goal doesn't specify a grade level, but the baseline data does.
Great. The goal is wonky and the baseline is wonky. Okay. Anything else? Thank you for sharing that. So tell your partner, elbow partner, what two things have to be in your baseline statement? What things need to be? The same and the same.
Same.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll do it together. Baseline statement has to have the same skill and the same measurement. Now highlight, how many of you brought your own IEP with you today? Raise your hand if you got yours. Okay. I think it's super beneficial when you dive into your own work because that, I often thought that I had all these things, great things in my IEP when I didn't, because I did this experience. I had the same experience as you all did. And then I realized, as some of us, I needed to grow in this area. So if you guys will dive into the IEP that you brought, look at one of your goals, and go back and look at the baseline statement in the present level, and see how you all did. If you did not bring your IEP, go ahead and use Jimmy's. Go back and look at his goal and baseline statement. Did you find at least one of your baseline statements? Not yet? Okay, keep going. All right, does anyone want to be brave enough to share their experience? Thank you.
Like I said, I'm very good at the narrative, describing exactly what they can do and where they need to go, but I did not have an exact baseline data statement in my.
And we're just all here growing. That's what we're doing today. So Thank you for being honest and sharing.
I have a question too. So for baseline, is it beneficial to put like a date of when it was established?
You,
Or not, or is that irrelevant of like, okay, it happens in an IEP cycle, say a kiddo is due for a new one. Is it necessary to say, hey, we're starting to figure out where they're at, or it could be a brand new kiddo that come in and do nothing?
you don't have to put the date, but you want it to be current as possible. So that's why you would look at the last 4 data points of your progress monitoring or gathering the new probes. Anybody else have?
I'm sorry, you were talking about progress monitoring. I know we were saying we traditionally will do like the last 5. So is it just 4, or is there like a magic number we're supposed to be using? Or because I know in all my year, I'm like over the last 5 trials, past the 5 trials. So should we not be using the past 5?
Were your goals written to be out of 5 trials? Is that the reason why
Gotcha.
we're looking at the last 5?
4 out of 5.
Get my brain.
Okay.
Yes. When in doubt, we're going to refer to Janice.
Janice. Okay, anybody else want to share out? All right. So now we're going to talk about adverse effect statements. Now let me ask you guys really quickly. Are the students here, are they hearing impaired in some way? Yes, I see you, yes. I look at that, I'm picking it up, yeah. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so a student qualified because they have a hearing loss. And that means that the student must, in order to qualify, they must require specially designed instruction and have an adverse effect on their access to the curriculum, right? So I'm going to show you an adverse effect statement just for hearing loss. But let's say we have students that have hearing losses, but they may have academic needs too, right? And we would address them in the present level. Under the academic present level, we'll talk about how that academic need is impacting them. When we're talking about the hearing loss, which all of our students have, we're going to talk about how the hearing loss impacts them. Back in the old days, the good old days, we used to say, Jimmy has difficulty in something which adversely affects his access to the general curriculum. Has anybody written one like that? I did, almost all of mine, until I learned that, and especially this last year, KDE started to really look at the adverse effect statements because, like everything else, the IEP has to be individualized. And this is just an example of the Kentucky Administrative Regulations. Is right here on the right side. It says, we need to include in the IEP a statement including how the disability affects the child's involvement and progress in the general curriculum. So I'm just going to break down Clement's adverse effect statement. Clement's hearing loss impacts his social and interactions with others, which adversely affects his ability to follow oral directions. This is individualized for this particular student, but his ability to acquire information through auditory channels may impact his peer collaboration, small group work activities, station work, and incidental learning. So again, this is personalized and individualized for this particular student. But notice how it's not just that standard statement. It's really talking about, this is what we want to know, how is it impacting the student in the classroom? That gives great information to us as readers and instructors when we're working with students. So this should also take some time to think about it. And just look at your students, like how is their hearing loss impacting them in the classroom?
And importantly, how would it impact them in the general education classroom too? Because here they're going to have peers that also know sign language or have other adaptations that they're using, but we're always comparing them back to their peers that are in the general education classroom.
And some of our students will come in and out, right? And so we need to be able to express how that hearing loss is impacting that student. So in let's just jump to yours. Jump to your IEP and look at your adverse effects statement. See if it's the general statement or if you really are describing how that disability is impacting his access to the curriculum. If you don't have one that you brought, go ahead and use Jimmy's and look at how they did it. Jimmy has some good ones and he has some poo-poo ones. So, we'll talk about that.
This is his name. This is his name.
Did I give you enough time? Okay, yes, couple more minutes.
Can you go back to that,
Example?
yeah, thank you, yeah.
I kind of have a question about that.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna stand up. Okay. His hearing loss. If a child is at KSD, his hearing loss is not impacting him. If his hearing loss, which deprived him of full access to language, which is now causing issues because he's got access to ASL, but it's that historical impact of language deprivation. And I've actually seen an IP from Fayette County that did a really good job of teasing that out. But so I wanted to say that because it's like, it's not the hearing loss, it's the sensory deficit. You can accommodate for that.
Right.
But it's the resultant language deprivation, honestly, that is causing the need for the specialized support, particularly with the.
Right. So the hearing loss is impacting their access to that language, right? And that adversely affects his access to the general curriculum.
Access and acquisition of language, and, yeah, I just, like, it's not, in my eyes, sorry, wrong, but it needs to be expanded upon, because it's really presenting oversimplified and probably not accurate view of what we're.
And I would suggest, if you feel really strongly, and you know that you've got some good adverse effects statements, you can tease that out. If you guys work as do you all work as PLCs? You guys get together as PLCs? Maybe that's something that you work out. Just remember that you're considering the hearing loss, because the hearing loss, by law, will have an adverse effect on the student's access to the general curriculum. So when you're making that description, be sure to describe how that hearing loss is adversely affecting his access.
Like you say that it's in Helen's report that he needs visual language.
Can you say his hearing loss and resulting language
Yes,
delay, like you can
Yeah.
add that in?
tweak
So,
it,
Yeah.
tweak it.
So we are given the latitude of, I share that same, it's not the hearing loss, it's a sensory deficit or sensory disability. So it is a problem of access to, because a child of language and natural language development. So we do have the latitude to say Clements or Clement's language deficits, language delays are impacting how he is doing
Well-
socially or academically.
We would say, okay, but we have to get that hearing loss piece in
Have to
there.
get hearing loss.
So you could say that one more time, because I could figure out how to get it in there. Say it one more
So
time.
Clement's hearing loss and language delays adversely impact his social emotional regulation.
Perfect.
You have to get the hearing loss piece in because otherwise they don't qualify. And that's not us. That's not any of us. That is the federal and state regulation. We didn't write that, we didn't develop that. That's just the regs. That's the eligibility requirement. And that's how they're here. That's how we are servicing them. So we have to get that piece in. If we don't get that piece in, and unfortunately, I don't live by the monitoring police, I don't mean it like that, but if we were monitored and they came in and looked at that and we didn't have that piece in there, they could say this student isn't eligible. I mean, that's ultimately what they could say. If we didn't write our eligibility sheets up correctly or we didn't determine eligibility right, they could say, well, this student isn't eligible.
Because there's no impact
Right.
from the hearing loss. So, but what I liked what you said was due to language acquisition due to hearing loss, right? If we just get the hearing loss piece in there, and then how that language acquisition due to hearing loss. Yes, and then talk about how that is impacting you in the classroom.
And I'm willing, if you all want, for us to, outside of this group, outside of this, if you all want to work on a few impact statements and a few things, I don't want them all to look the same, but if you all want to work on a few sample impact statements that kind of address the issues and address kind of how we're thinking about those things, I would be happy for us to sit down and let's work on a few things that kind of address those areas because, you all definitely are the experts in this area. And so I'm happy for us to get together and talk about those things.
That would be helpful. I mean, I know it's gonna be helpful.
You brought up a good question. Language deprivation, and that word, deprivation, needs to be documented in the IEP, but it can become sticky. Because for some of us, and most of us here, who really don't quite understand exactly what that student had experienced from birth to their arrival at school, that timeline there, we don't know much about it. We've not seen them, we don't know much about them. So we protect ourselves by using the language and the language deprivation of what we see now when they get here. We know that they have been deprived, they have a deficit of language. And so that's more safer than using deprivation in the IEP for the purpose of writing the IEP. And maybe that can be used to protect us.
And I think we have to be a little careful about talking about deprivation and I understand where you all are going with it, but I think we have to be careful about talking about that birth to 5 years old and putting that in the IEP because we're basically, that can be offensive to some parents. We're basically saying, hey, Mom and Dad, you didn't provide for your child. You didn't, get your child enough, exposure, or you didn't have first steps, or you didn't have so-and-so involved. So I think we have to be, to Byron's point, the word deprivation is a very strong word. So without us taking too much time today to tease this out because they are here only for a short time, I think it's another conversation that we all can have, and let's look at it a different, let's get back together and revisit some impact statements that kind of address both, that we all can kind of live with. How about that? Is that okay?
you know what I love about this? That you guys are passionate about your children and about the pieces of the IEP that's gonna support your kids, and you're wanting to figure this out. I appreciate that. All right, think in your mind, well, first of all, did you all learn at least one thing that you might wanna improve on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now, think in your mind,
Only one, because I'm almost perfect. No, I'm just kidding. I told you I was loud.
I love that, I love that. Okay, so think in your mind, what's the one thing, what's your intention when you leave here today? You've got this information. What's your intention? What do you want to grow on? Now, I want you to think about that for just a minute. You got it? Okay, then I want you to stand up, find somebody across the room, and share your intention, what you're going to do with this information from this day forward.
I just ride. Best EP rider. But then, then I looked for the actual stuff.
And that's another
Okay, guys, you all will, you'll go back to your seats. We're gonna finish up.
I did have an answer.
We are finished for today. And I want to thank these ladies, they've done a great job. Thank you all very much. And the one thing I will say about this is it has been a long time since you all had an IEP training. So, and you all do a really good job coming to meetings prepared, and I so appreciate that. So, I want to say to you, I'm going to ask you, make this your IEP Bible. Bring this with you. Use it. And if you don't use it, then that's your fault. And it is available digitally, so if you're better at that, you can just Google Kentucky IEP guidance document and you can use it. Right. But I love the guiding questions because it makes you think about things. And I think if you use those, I think that'll be great. As you all know, and I won't take very long, I have taken another job. I'm director of state schools now, but I'm kind of doing both jobs. I think maybe I don't know if I've jumped into the from the frying pan into the fire, but maybe, I don't know. But but anyway, but I'm kind of doing both jobs right now. But again, you all are so gracious and help me do things because you do your jobs well. So it's easy for me to do things here and to help support you all, and I appreciate that. But we also have Maggie Hartledge. She is our transition coordinator, and some of you all have seen her in middle school and high school meetings. But Maggie is also doing her director of special ed practicum with me. So she will help chair some ARCs as part of that practicum.
So you all will get to see her doing some of those things because she can do that as part of that practicum. So if you all see her in meetings, it's not because James just disappeared. It's because I've turned a few things over to Maggie just to get her to do a few things as part of that practical experience. So, and she's very skilled. Maggie's a school psych by trade, and she was a teacher at Will for as a psychologist, and has had a wealth of experience. So I trust her immensely. So, is there any do you all have any questions or anything before we go today?
Thank you for like, I mean, I'm not saying that all my peers, but me. Thank you for talking like on a teacher level, like understand, not like up here and making us tune out. Because like, really, I mean, I learned, like we were saying, like I just thought I was the best writer ever of IPs. Just like narrating and telling a story and like, this is what they're gonna do. But like, oh, I forgot this part. So thank you. Thank you for that.
We've all been in your seats, so we know exactly what that's like.
So we appreciate it. Again, if you all have any questions, my cell phone number is at the bottom of my email. You all feel free to call me. I don't mind you calling me. You can call me day or night. I don't mind. And if you need me, and I usually will try and get back with you within a few hours or at least within a day. So, and if you need to, email me too. So don't hesitate to call, okay? And everybody go home and have a great weekend.